Hey everybody, this episode is going to be a bit of an instructional video. We're going to look at the crossover assembly for the little X Bravo that you see over my shoulder here. It's a new model that we've launched using the new M130 woofer and the T26 tweeter that is the same tweeter used in all the X series products. This is very similar to the XLS Encore, just in a smaller size, and so it's ideal for really high-end desktop applications, small rooms, near field monitoring, things like that where you need a small speaker. This is a phenomenal little speaker, and I know a lot of you guys have reservations about doing DIY stuff. You've never done it before, maybe you're intimidated by it, or you think it may be really difficult to do, and the one thing you're most stressed out about is, how do I assemble the crossover? Because the crossover parts come completely unassembled and you have to put all the pieces together. But guys, it's just not that hard. And in this episode, we're going to look right at crossover assembly. And it's going to be a lot easier than you think. I'm going to show you some basics, and then we're going to zoom the camera in right on what I'm doing and let you guys watch the assembly process. First of all, how do you read the wiring diagrams? They're not that hard. This is basically the wiring diagram without the measurements being listed on there. And these little lines here, little squiggly loop, 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 that represents coils. This little break here, there's two little slashes, represents a capacitor. And this little jagged number here represents a resistor. And whether you recognize these emblems or not, it doesn't make any difference, because the values that you need to know that goes in these places are written on the actual wiring diagram that you get, and they're written on the components that you're going to be putting together. The resistors or the capacitors, they're going to have those values on there, and all you have to do is match the values for what's on here. I've told people before what my wife used to do when she'd help with pulling orders and packing orders and putting parts in boxes. She would take the printout and she would lay all the parts on the printout. So she'll lay a resistor right here. She'll lay the capacitor that's this value. She'll lay it right there on this paper. She'll lay that inductor right there. And then these two resistors at the end, she'll lay them right on there. And I've told her before, all you have to do now is just twist those parts together and you've assembled the crossover. That's all there is to it. Especially in the woofer circuit here, it just has one inductor and one capacitor, and that's it. So basically you're just taking this leg of this inductor and you're twisting it onto the input side. And when I say the input side, it's, you look at the print and you run the caps in the direction of the print, and you twist those two together, and that's all there is for the crossover. Two parts. It's great when you can do a crossover for a speaker and not have to put a bunch of parts on it to correct the circuit. If you can use lower order filters because the drivers are well behaved, and you can get really nice roll-offs of the tweeter and the woofer cascading into each other and summing really well, it's great to be able to use just a second order filter on this stuff. That's lessen the signal path. You can use high quality parts then instead of a bunch of cheap parts and get really good results. So let's look at what I've done. I'm going to get the camera kind of zoomed in and let you guys really get a look at this, and we're going to walk through this whole process. So let me move the camera around and let's check this out. Alright, this should give you guys a little better view of what I'm doing. What we have here is the crossover for the little Bravo. This is the version with Sonicaps and also a MyFlex bypass cap. So I've connected it together, and I had to put one together to figure out how I wanted to lay it out. And now that I've got it kind of laid out, I can then take one of the boards that I made for it, and the way I made the board for it was I simply laid this out knowing that it's going to have to fit through this woofer hole of this little Bravo, which is a 4 7/8 of an inch diameter hole. And I measured that I had it 4 inches across and 7.5 inches long, that's what I need for a board that'll fit in there. So that'll work fine for this application. It's going to slide right in. So I went and cut some boards that are that size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this thing out on the board now that I've kind of got the layout figured out, and I'm going to mark it where I want to put zip ties and where I want to put some screw holes in it to where I can screw this to the bottom of the cabinet. And I'm just going to go in and mark all that stuff. And then once I get those holes marked, we're going to go drill those holes and then Duratex the boards and make them look pretty. So let's do some marking here. I am going to use one of these. And basically what I'm doing is just kind of figuring out where I want to wrap these. And sometimes you can wrap them around the outside of the board instead of drilling holes on both sides. And that's what I'm going to do on this one. On the inductor, I'm going to use 3 to hold it down. And I'm going to mark where I want those done. And then over here on this resistor, I'm going to do one that laps around it. So I'm just going to do one around it there. On these two, I'm going to wrap 2 zip ties all the way around these 2 parts. So I'm going to put 2 holes right over here. And I'm also going to use those same 2 holes to hold this inductor down. So I'm going to put marks on the other side of the inductor. So we're going to do 2 zip ties through it that direction. Resistors just need 1. And again, I'm wrapping it around the outside of the board. And then on this one, there's not a lot of room here between the capacitor and the inductor. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to do 2 holes and wrap 1 on each side. So it's a little hard for me to reach, but just go in and mark it and mark on the other side. And that's it for marking the holes that we're going to use to hold the parts down. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use a little different color, and I'm going to mark where I want to put a different type of hole. I'm going to put a hole for some screws that's going to hold this thing down whenever I mount it inside. So I'm going to put one right here at the back, and I'm going to make it into a little X. And I'm going to go over here on this side. I'm going to put another screw hole here, and I'm going to recess those screws just a little bit. And I'm going to put one over here in this corner. It's always better to kind of lay this stuff out and figure out where you've got space before you start drilling and screwing holes. And I think I'm going to put one right up here at the front. So I'm going to use 4 screws to hold this thing down. Move that out of the way. So we're going to go and drill holes for all this stuff, and I'm going to put the boards together. We're going to drill through both of them at the same time and make some nice boards for this crossover to mount on. And then I'm going to let you guys watch me assemble this crossover and mount it all to the board. And we're going to mount this one to the board. And I'm going to kind of show you step by step how to twist the parts together and how to put them on the board. Alright, back from the hole drilling process. As you can see here, I've got 2 identical boards, and I've drilled all the holes in them. And I take a little die grinder with a little grinding stone on it, and I run it through the edges and kind of knock the edges off, especially on the ones where I'm going to countersink a little finishing nail. Not a finishing nail, a little finishing screw like a sheetrock screw. It's going to recess into these spots here just a little bit, so I recess that a little bit. And so now these are going to go get Duratex to make them look pretty. And then they're going to just lay right on there, just like you see there. I'll line all the holes up and put all the zip ties on everything. So let's go make them look pretty, and then let's do some assembly work. Hey everybody, welcome back. We're picking up where we left off with the assembly of the X Bravo crossovers. I've Duratex coated the little crossover boards that I cut last week, and these are now ready for some parts to be put on them. So let's get right to it. I'm going to move the camera around to where it's zoomed in right here on the work, so you can see how this goes together, and we're going to let you guys watch me completely assemble one of the crossovers and get everything mounted. Alright folks, this one is the one we assembled just so that we could see how we wanted to lay out the parts. And now we're going to take those parts and put them on this board and zip everything down. And what I do is I start with the largest ones first. I'm going to move this camera over a little bit here, and I usually hang it off the table just so I can get zip ties in and through there, and that gives me a little bit of an easier way to get it in. 3 zip ties to hold down the big inductor. If you guys want, when you drill your holes for these, you can make holes for 4 of them if you want. I do that sometimes depending on how big the inductors get. But in this case, I think for its size, 3 of them will hold it down just fine. Once you get them zipped on, I usually get a pair of pliers and give them a good squeeze. Tighten them up real well. And then I've got a couple that I'm going to wrap around this capacitor. If this is too boring for you guys, you can always fast forward. But knowing you guys, you'll watch me do the whole thing. Once you get the parts all zip tied on, they're pretty much on. If you want, you can go around them with a little hot glue and run some hot glue all the way around some of the parts to kind of help stabilize them, keep them from vibrating or moving around a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. All that helps. For this inductor that's standing up, I always shove 2 of them on there, or put 2 of them on there to give it a little added strength. Kind of 1 on each side. There we go. And the second one, you always have to be sure you're sticking your zip ties in the right direction, because you want it to come out to where it goes in that hole in that direction. Alright, 2 more on these, and I'm using the same holes that I had before, and I don't know if this one's going to make it. This may just barely make it. If it does, no, it's not going to make it. I'm going to have to grab some longer zip ties because this is a little bit more of a loop, and then I'm also going to grab some short zip ties to do these. So we're going to pause for just a moment at where I am with this right now, and we'll come right back to it in just a minute. Okay, I've got me some longer zip ties here to go around these capacitors, so that'll make it a lot easier. Usually on a pretty good sized capacitor like this, I'll put 2 zip ties around it to kind of help hold them down. On the little resistors, I always just do 1. Even if it's a small capacitor, I may just do 1. Just give them a nice squeeze. Got these over here that we haven't given a really tight squeeze to yet. And these 2. And then while I was at it, I also went and grabbed some of these little shorty zip ties, a little smaller one, for the resistors, because the loop that we're making with those is pretty small. Now we've got 3 resistors that we're going to do. And then the one right over here. Best place to get these zip ties, Harbor Freight Tools. Harbor Freight Tools has a lot of cheap tools, and I'm not real big on the tools. Some of the tools I don't feel like are all that great. Some of them are pretty nice, but when it comes to zip ties and things like that, man, it's tough to beat Harbor Freight Tools. You know what? I'm going to grab a little different cutter. Hold on for a second. This is the cutter I normally use for these. A little bit easier to get down on them. Alright, we've got one of them done. This is going to be our example. This is the input side. The woofer circuit, we've got this coil. We're coming out of this coil to going to positive. We've got a return leg on the woofers that's going to catch here and go back to negative. So we're negative from the woofer to here. And then we've got the same positive leg. It's going to feed the tweeter circuit, which is going to go through these caps and through this resistor, and it's going to come out here. There's the positive leg that's going to go to the tweeters. We've got a negative that's going to come back. It's going to catch this resistor and this inductor, which is also connected to this cap. And we're going to run one continuous wire from there all the way to here, and then all the way back to the white or negative tube connector. So pretty simple. And we're going to do the same with this one. But as we put it together, and we're going to keep this one handy here, we're going to use it as a guide. And as we put this one together, we're going to look at how the wire leads come off of the inductors, and we're going to replicate all of this going into the next one. So we're doing the same thing that we did on the other, but in this case, since we've already done the layout by using the one that we assembled, it's easier if we connect the parts and then twist them together in place. If we solder it all together just like we did on the last one, it might be a little bit harder to line all the parts back up to these holes that we've pre-drilled, because we've pre-drilled all these holes for that crossover. So if we zip tie all the parts together first, then we can twist the connections together afterward, and everything will work out really well. So what we can do is just we're going to feed these two through, and we're going to make us a little spot here for the capacitor that goes in the woofer circuit, because this big inductor that we just used here, or we just installed, the woofer circuit, and we run the capacitors always in the direction of the print. So as it says Sonicap on it, we go from left to right just like the print is that's on the capacitors. One leg of it is a shield end. It's a little bit different. It's going to the outside versus the inside, so we just want to keep them the same. Now that we've got the woofer circuit we've got the two parts on the woofer circuit there, what we're going to do then is just going to twist these wires together. Just like that. And we're going to take something and give them a little tighter twist. Now, once you're twisting parts together, always keep in mind that there's a place where you want to stop. You don't want to twist parts together till you get right down to the end and just keep twisting until you pull the leads out of them. You don't want to pull the leads out of them. And that's pretty common, actually. I've had a lot of guys that are twisting parts together. They just keep twisting them together until they pull them out. And that's not what you want to do. So in this case, I'm looking at the values on the resistors. This is the one that we want to use. So I'm going to take one of these little shorties. We're going to feed it through here. I'm going to zip it down on there. And we're going to run all of these in the direction of the print also. These are the new Dayton resistors that are pure copper. And they're supposed to actually be a really good resistor. And so far, they do sound very good. We were using the Mills resistors as the top resistors for most of our models, but it's gotten to where it's impossible to get them. Mills lead time has gone to between 6 months and 2 years lead time, which is totally unacceptable. So we've had to find some new sources for that stuff. So these are the caps for the tweeter circuit, and we're just going to simply twist these two together. This is the Sonicap and the MyFlex pure copper foil bypass cap. Now what the small cap is doing basically is it's discharging the stored energy of the larger cap. Guys, I have to apologize on this video I shot as I was assembling this. The card on the camera filled up and you missed the last bit of it. So what you missed was me connecting the two capacitors and the tweeter circuit to the resistor that's at the front of the circuit. At the end of the circuit, there's another resistor, and then that's the lead that goes on to the tweeter. This resistor is part of an L pad, as you can see, kind of an L, that goes back to ground, and this inductor that's on here goes back to ground. What I did was twisted them together, and then once I had them twisted together, I just went real quick with the soldering gun and soldered those connections together. So I'm sorry you guys kind of missed a little bit of that, but it's actually pretty easy, and if you do your layout just like I've done this one, you'll have no problems with it at all. So next is we're going to go in and hook all the wiring that we need to go to all of these parts, and leave enough to go up to the drivers and up to the tube connectors. So stay tuned. Next episode we'll follow up with this one real quick. Oh yeah, real quick before I go and do all the wiring for these things, you guys have been asking me if you can also hot glue this stuff. And you can. The hot glue doesn't hurt anything. In fact, it really helps to hold the parts down. If you want to hot glue something, you can pick up the little hot glue guns for next to nothing. And what I do is just go around the parts and around the capacitors, around the resistors, around the inductors. Just go around the outside of them and give them a little dab of that stuff, and when it dries, of course, that will kind of help hold those things down and keep them from moving around. Will it help with vibration? I've had guys ask, will it help with vibration? Well, it can. It can a little bit, but it's not a super huge big deal. It's not going to be a huge vibrational stopper of some kind. It's not going to change the sound of anything, but it definitely helps hold things down. And wherever you can reach with the hot glue gun, just force some of that in there, and it'll definitely help hold it all down. I usually go through a couple of these things per crossover, these little glue sticks, and it doesn't take a lot. Remember, we're not trying to just use that as what's holding them down, but a little bit of a supplement. So it doesn't take a long time, it doesn't take a lot of it. And I try to get some on this side of the cap. Well, that stuff's hot also. You can tilt it, and a little pool of it will run in the direction that you've tilted it, and that'll help a little bit too. That's probably good. That's enough on there to help hold those parts down. That's all there is to hot gluing that stuff on there. Now, I'm going to finish up this one, and then we're going to do some wiring. Hey everybody, we're back to live action here, where we're about to connect all the wiring to the X Bravo crossover. So I've cut the wiring, and basically when I cut the wires, what I do is I'll just take one of the cabinets and set the crossover next to it, and use that as a guide, as if this is the side of it, so I know the woofer's here, the tweeter's here, the tube connectors are going to go in the back, and I use that as a guide to figure out how long to cut my wiring. So kind of simple as that. And first one I'm going to start with here is the input wire. That's going to be the wiring that goes from the tube connector to the input. And what I'm going to do is just connecting it there, holding it together, and then twisting them. Your connection is really the twisted pairs of wires. You want a good solid twisted connection. That's kind of like having a crimped connection, and that's actually your connection. The solder really just holds the connection. So there's the input, that's the positive that's going to those. Next I'm going to connect the wiring that is, I know you don't see me quite off camera here, I'm over here stripping this. I should strip where you can see it. I was stripping it over my little wastebasket here, so I just drop it straight in. But This is the positive that goes to the woofer. It's right there. And we're going to do the same thing on it. We're just going to twist those together. And I didn't get it twisted enough, which is okay because we can twist it more. I'm afraid I didn't get it twisted enough. That's just enough. It's just holding it on there. I guess it's not too bad. And let's go ahead and solder those two on there so they won't fall off while I'm twisting some of the rest of these on here. And I'm going to clean the tip. Just giving it a good little brushing over the wastebasket here. We're going to feed a little solder onto the tip, make sure it's hot. We're going to start up here at the top of the wire, and we're going to take a little bit of solder on the tip and put that right on it. And then it'll heat it up and start feeding solder down on it. And that's all there is to it, putting that joint together. We're going to come over here and do the same thing on this one. Try to turn it so you guys can see it a little bit. Going to put a little solder on the tip. We also want to make sure that our face isn't right over this. We don't want those fumes getting in our face. That's all there is to putting that, soldering those connections on. Now we've got a longer positive wire that's going to be the run for the tweeters. This is the positive leg for the tweeter. So again, I'm just grabbing them with a pair of pliers, holding them together on one end, and then on the other end we're just twisting it together and making a nice tight squeeze and fit on there. That one twisted together really well. Soldering iron's still pretty hot from soldering just a moment ago. Try to get this one to where you guys can see it. Can you see it right there? I'm going to put a little solder on the tip. We're going to put it right on it and feed solder on it and completely cover that wire with the solder. Now we've got all three of our connections made that are the positives. This one's going to the tweeter. That's this wire here, going straight across to the tweeter. Then we've got this wire here that is the positive coming off of those going to the woofer. And we've got our common positive, which is one wire, that's going back to the tube connectors. Next, I'm going to hook on the negative wire that's going to the woofer. And basically I'm just stripping this one and I'm going to connect it on right here. And then we've got another wire that's going to be the wire from the tweeter that we're going to put on here also. Hope you guys can see it. That is going to be one long continuous run from the tweeter all the way to the negative on the tube connector, and it's all going to be one continuous run, so no break in the wire. And I'll show you how we do that here in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and solder this one on. And feed that solder on all around both sides so it's completely soldered. So the solder is just really there to seal it and to hold it. So on this one, what we're going to do is we're going to use this as a guide right here at the back. We're making these the same. These are the inputs. And it's going to go to right there. So we're going to strip out a piece out of the middle of this wire, but we're not going to cut it. We're not going to put a break in it. So we've cut a little niche on each side there. And I'm just going to take the X-Acto knife and just kind of whittle that off of there. We're just going to go right along the wire and strip off a little bit of the insulation. I like to move it around just a little bit. Go right down the other side of it. peel that off of there, what we're left with is just a bare spot on the wire with insulation on each side of it. Just like that. We've just got a bare spot on the wire. And we're going to connect that right here on this same exact spot and twist it around on it. And that's going to be our return. And then we're going to get to put heat shrink on it. The heat shrink is basically just to seal the connections. Any amount of solder that didn't seal up our wiring is going to get sealed with a heat shrink, and we'll keep it from oxidizing over time, because you don't ever want it to oxidize. If it oxidizes, copper oxide is not conductive, not very conductive, so we want to seal it up and keep that from happening. So again, I'm just feeding solder onto it, going around to the back side and making a nice soldered connection. That's all there is to it. We've wired up one crossover now. We're going to take some heat shrink, and we're going to put some heat shrink on those things. I'm going to cut them kind of to the lengths that I need, and you just think about how that slides down over it, how long it needs to be. And there's the one for the tweeter. There's the shorter one that goes to the woofer, and there's the input one. And then we've got one that we're going to put here, and we're going to put it over our negative so that we keep a nice color combo. Here's another trick too. When you're sliding one of these over multiples, when the wire starts getting a little thick, you can slide this heat shrink onto some needle nose pliers and stretch it out a little bit, and that'll make it a little easier to slide over big stuff. So now we have our crossover assembled, we have the wiring on, and we're going to take our heat gun and go along and heat up that heat shrink to seal all our connections. There's our input. There's our wire going to the woofers, or to the woofer. Positive going to the tweeter. And you just need to kind of go up both sides. Trying to hold it up a little bit there so you guys can see it. And then we got one negative that's a common. And there we go. One crossover, fully assembled and wired. Now what I'll do typically is take the wiring and run them over here together and twist them, which helps cancel out some RF and EMI. We've got this one that's going to go to the woofers, so I'll usually bring those together. That's going to go to the front, and just twist them together right there. And some of it we're going to wind up trimming at the end, so you don't have to twist them all the way. And then the tweeter, this is our longer one. It's going to go all the way up there to the tweeter. And that's all there is to it. I'm going to cut, and I'll assemble the other one. I don't guess you guys need to watch me do it twice. You can always rewind to watch me do this again. And then next is going to be mounting them in the cabinets. I'll let you guys check out these cabinets that I did. I did some different painted colors on the cabinet, and I'll give you guys a better shot at that when I get a chance. I got a little blackish, grayish, and brown, and little bitty flakes of copper in there that I'm going to pick up that copper color with some copper painted screws that are going to go on this. It's going to look pretty neat, I think, when we're done. But yeah, we'll cut here, and I'll do some little work, and we'll come back and install these into the box. Hey everybody, just a quick one here to show you guys the cabinets. The little Bravo cabinet there that I coated in Duratex and then sprayed it in a metallic bronze color, and then went in and added some darker and lighter colors to it, and then finished it off with some light copper speckles that I think will look nice with the little copper screws that I'm going to put in. And I want to show you this, not just to say, hey, look at this, this is easy to do, just Durtex cabinets. But the next step, now that we have the crossover assembled, is just to set this in the bottom of the box and screw it in. Now for screws, I like using these little drywall screws. It's just 1 inch, or you can use 3/4 inch drywall screws. This board with it's about a 1/4 inch with the zip ties underneath it, raising it up. We've got about 3/4 of an inch there. And in here I've drilled holes, and in those holes the little screw will set down in there. And I've drilled 4 of them, which is fine for as big as this crossover is, especially if it's not going to be shipped upside down or something. And we're just going to set that in there and screw those in, and we'll have the crossover installed, and then we can connect the wiring and stuff. But as soon as I get that in, then I can cut no-res and install all the no-res inside of it. So those are the next steps. Pretty simple stuff. I'm not going to film me screwing screws. You guys kind of know how that works. We're just taking a Phillips screwdriver and pressing down hard on that thing and just screwing it straight to the bottom of the box. That's simple. So hang in there, and we'll be right back with the next segment of this, where we cut and install no-res into the boxes and stuff. So we're getting close. Hey everybody, welcome back to the X Bravo assembly video. We've been working on these things. We've got crossovers assembled. They've been wired. They've been now installed in the box, and that was simply done by sliding those in and screwing them down with 4 screws. Just screw them to the bottom of the box. It's simple as that. I know the lighting isn't the greatest in the shop, but here we are, and this is where we work on stuff. So at this point of time in the day, the sun's shining through the windows. I've got the blinds full. It is what it is. So hopefully you guys can see me okay. This is going to be a short one. It's real easy. We're down to putting no-res in these things. And the way to put no-res in here is actually very simple. There's no wrong way to put no-res into a box. And I don't need to provide for you pre-cut dimensional cut list for no-res. This stuff's super easy. What I do is just get out a measuring tape and just go in and measure the spaces in between the braces that are in these things, and just cut the no-res up into squares. It doesn't matter if you cut it into big squares or a bunch of little squares or whatever you want to do. Doesn't make any difference. It's super easy to put in. On this one, I did something a little different on this one, and I cut no-res with a table saw. Table saws just blaze right through this. It makes smooth cuts. Cuts like butter. It's the easiest way to cut it. If you don't have a table saw, you can cut it with an X-Acto knife. You can cut it with a box cutting knife. You can cut it with any kind of sharp knife. Lay a metal ruler or something down the side of it, and just go down that thing and score it from the back side, and just start cutting through the damping layer till you get to the foam layer, and then just start zinging through the foam layer. It's pretty easy. So what I've done is on this one, the crossover takes up quite a bit of width in the bottom of the box. So the foam, when you put the no-res into it, the foam kind of crowds it a little bit, and I wanted to get a damper all the way almost to the bottom. So I just turned the saw at like a 45-degree angle and just cut this thing at a 45-degree angle, and at the front I cut it at a 45-degree angle. That way I could get this out a little closer. Otherwise, if you don't have the ability to cut at a 45-degree angle, just come back a little bit. You don't want this stuff right up on the woofer. You don't want the woofer to have to be pushing air through the thing. So I just diagonally cut a couple of them here. So that's just going to slide straight through. These things have peel and stick, pressure sensitive adhesive on it. It's really tacky. So in this case, I'm going to fold it just a little bit and slide it in and try to work my way around or under the bracing and get it where it's supposed to be. I'm going to have to put my reading glasses on, and hopefully you guys can see this a little bit. I'm just sliding it into one side, making sure that it's in there all the way, making sure I'm not catching any of the wiring, and then it's just a matter of pressing it in. Just go in, press it down real well, and that's it. It holds it in, and that's how easy it is to install the no-res. You'll go in and install all the different pieces. I've cut pieces that go in the back, pieces that go in the front, little pieces that go on the back wall in between the little pieces of no-res, and I usually want to attack the sidewalls first. The sidewalls are your biggest panel area, so put it on there first. That does take up a little bit of a room at the top of the box because the no-res is going to be all the way to the top, and then that leaves you a strip across the top which is braced, and it's pretty solid anyway, but we'll put some no-res pieces across the top and in the back. The back panel is much smaller and it's braced also. We'll put some little small pieces of no-res in around that, and it will tighten things up really well, just like this one. This one I've already lined with no-res. It is a little heavier once you put the no-res inside, but man, it's dense. Nice solid box, no resonances. That's what you want. So that's it for this little tutorial on installing no-res. I'm going to get the rest of this in, and then we're going to install tube connectors on the back of these things. Put some ports in, mount the drivers, get them ready to play. See you guys in the next episode. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are now to the point of about to install tube connectors into the back of these things and let you guys see just how easy it is. Tube connectors, of course, is a binding post replacement that is an actual hollow copper tube, and what it does is it allows internal speaker wire and external speaker wire to be like this, tip to tip, with a copper tube around it. So it's low mass, high contact area, and it sometimes greatly improves the clarity over the use of different binding posts and things that have different types of metals, different types of insertion losses. Some are brass, some are copper, but then they have nuts on them, sometimes even steel nuts, and that really degrades the sound quite a bit. So this is a great solution. It's easy to install, and I'm going to show you right now just how easy it is to install. So we've got all 4 wires hanging out the back of the speaker here. I have stripped them, and what you want to do is you want to insert the male pin, which is hollow all the way to the tip. You want to insert it into the tube connector, and now it creates a stop point. So what you want to do is slide your wire onto it, your internal wire, strip it so that the end of the stripped wire just comes to right there on it, and then you're going to be able to crimp it and solder it on. Be sure though, before you put it on there, put some heat shrink on it. Heat shrink comes with all of our kits. You can slide that heat shrink on each one of these. I'm going to do all 4 of them here. And when we've got that connection crimped and soldered, we can then slide that that heat shrink right down onto the tube connector. So we've got a stop point, got it inserted in there. I'm going to slide it on it and give it a crimp. We've got a crimp tool here. It's got a little titty on the inside here and a little groove cut on the other side. What you can do is squeeze it, and you want to put the little part with the little titty sticking up there, you want to put that on the back side of the slit. There's a slit on the front side or on the top, and you want that to go into this groove here. So what we're going to do is slide that on there, get it in place, and crimp it on there. Give it a good squeeze, and then we can pull this out. We put it into the next one. We're going to do the same thing and slide it on, line it up, give it a good squeeze, on to the next one. I know you guys think, man, how hard is it to install those things? It's real easy. It's much easier than binding posts, and they sound a lot better. Way easier to install. And last one. Putting it on and just giving it a nice crimp. Simple as that. We got all of them crimped on there. We want to inspect it a little. I like to sometimes squeeze the sides in a little more on it. Make sure that the back side there's got a good little squeeze to it. Those look pretty good. That one looks real good. That one turned out great. So we're all lined up there, and what we're going to do next is we're going to solder all those connections on there. So what I'm going to do is clean my soldering tip with a little brush here. I'm just giving a little brush. Make sure it's nice and clean. We always want it to be clean when we start to solder. And I've got some solder reeled out here. We're going to tin the tip, so to speak. We're going to get a little on the tip, and you don't want to put your face over it. A lot of you guys like to wear masks. That's a good idea. And then I'm going to put that right on it so that I'm transferring heat into it. And then I'm going to feed solder right down into that thing and give it a nice soldered connection on top of the fact that it's crimped. And that also helps seal the hole. And then I'm going to move on to the next one. See, that's it. That just didn't take very long at all. You want to use a good soldering iron that's got a lot of heat. You want to get on it quick and get off it. You don't want to be on it for a long time. On to the third one. And just feed that solder right down into that groove. That looks great. And then last one. Well, you guys keep saying, man, I don't know how to solder. It's hard. Or how do you solder all that stuff on there? And man, that stuff goes on there easily. That's it. That's it. It's also, all four of them are soldered on, so that wasn't hard at all. Next, we'll let it cool for just a little bit, and then slide the heat shrink down over it, and we'll seal all those connections. It's usually pretty. That feels pretty good. All right, we got heat shrink on it. Of course, we got to let the heat gun get a little warm. Now we're sealing the connection. That'll help keep the wire from oxidizing if you've got any copper wire exposed. That'll really help seal it. See, I told you this was easier than installing binding posts. Alright, last thing we're going to have to do is pop them in. And what I like to do is get them lined up, make sure that they fit, and always you want to pre-fit them a little bit, make sure that they fit. And these are really nice and tight. And what I'll do then is I like to put a little bit of super glue around the outside of it just to help kind of glue that in there. I like the kind of the gel-based super glue. And it doesn't take very much. Doesn't take very much at all. And then you can just tap these in with a little tap hammer. That's what I like to use there. That's it. That's the whole process. That's all there is. I got two more to put in. And then we shove the ports in. Now the port comes with a piece down here in the bottom where they form it. It's a little part of the injection molding. You can just cut that out and sand it out a little bit. And make sure your hole for your port is the right size. And that'll slide right in. I'll put a little goop or some silicone around that and pop those things in there. Let them dry. And then we'll be ready to install the drivers into these things. See, that wasn't hard at all. Next little episode, we hook up drivers. All right, drivers are in. It's all buttoned up. Measured and tested both of them. They were a perfectly matched pair. That really helps when we send out matched parts. When you order kits from us and order Sonic caps, they go out in matched pairs. So that helped, and they laid right on top of each other. The frequency response did. Probably as close a matched pair as I've done. Now it's time to go burn them in. What do you guys think of the color? And I like the copper accents. And this was all Duratex, super easy to do. I wanted to show you guys just a down and dirty, foolproof, easy way to coat this thing. So hopefully you liked it. Hopefully you like the assembly videos. If you have questions, put them in the comment section below. I appreciate you guys watching the videos. If you have questions, again, fire them at me. See you in the next episode.